this brand is changing the way that data is powering our entire food supply chain. Shabazz might be the number one smarty pants in the whole produce industry, all right? Welcome to the Produce Moms. This is the podcast where I talk to various people who've made an impact on the fruit and vegetable community. There are so many stories to share that will change the way you look at fresh produce.
Hi guys, I'm glad to be here. I wish I wore my pants. I'm just wearing shorts right now. That's the wonder of working from home. So yeah, I'm glad to be here. I've known Lori for a long time, and I'm the vice president of post-harvest technology at Strella. It's been a wonderful journey, and we just love what we do here. Something that has never been done before, and I'm very glad that I'm associated with Strella. I've seen it all. I've been there, done that. This is quite exciting. Absolutely.
I'd love to hear it. We're going to dive into exactly what all this excitement is about. I can tell you I've had a couple pre-show meetings with the team at Strella, and Shabazz is right. This is a solution like our industry has never seen before. Just like his desk gets a lot of pitches, we too get a lot of pitches at our desk where I'm like, this sounds like something we've already talked about on this show. I don't know if we necessarily need to give another spotlight to a coating or some of these other strategies that are all about, extending shelf life and mitigating food waste. But this, Strella, is different. And we're thrilled to have you here, Shabazz. Thank you. All right, we're going to start with the other member of the lineup here today. That's Jay. Jay is the co-founder and the COO.
My career started more on the field side. So I worked with DuPont in the field and on the growing side. And I think that's a really interesting perspective to come to the food supply chain with, because it's really an extension of the field. And what a lot of people maybe isn't top of mind is this is a live product that was just grown outside, and now it's in a warehouse. And having that perspective, we think, really allows us to do a better job in the supply chain, because we're treating this like something that's alive.
Catherine, introduce yourself. You are the co-founder and CEO of Strella, and we're really glad you're here.
Thank you so much, Lori. It's a pleasure to be on the podcast. My background actually isn't in produce. I grew up learning about neuroscience and neurogenetics, but at some point read that crazy statistic that 40% of all food is wasted before it's consumed. And that was the most ridiculous thing I'd ever heard. And on top of that, I quickly felt guilty because I take it for granted that I can go to the grocery store and be faced with a number of amazing options every single day, 24/7. And so that led me on a journey to learn more about produce, how it's grown, how it's brought to the store, and eventually started Strella.
We're going to get into that founder story. Before we do, though, Shabazz, I want to kind of kick things off with you. I mean, help people understand, what is Strella? Why is it something that you, someone who's seen it all and been a legendary part of this industry for so many years, why are you here?
And what I saw was a lot of improvements in packaging of produce, using certain chemicals and gases to slow down the respiration rate of the produce, to extend their shelf life. So the entire gamut of technologies, mostly that I saw, was around either packaging, chemicals, or coatings. And these things have been done for the last 40 years or so. There's nothing new. I mean, graphics, better color, different kind of films and stuff like that was happening. But when Strella comes along and says, we're not going to use any of those things, but we're going to actually read or listen to what the produce is saying to us, and then organize or reorganize the way it needs to be sent through the supply chain, is what intrigued me. Nobody does that. That has never been done before. Everybody is, first in, first out. Pack them, treat them, coat them, send them, and then be at the mercy of temperature, in the supply chain. And that's pretty much it. A lot of emphasis was always and has been given on shelf life, which is number of days of extension. Nobody talked about how do you extend the fresh life. I think I probably coined, I mean, I've stopped using the word shelf life at all. I always now use fresh life, where when is the optimum time to eat a particular fruit? You want your consumer to have the best fruit, best product when he consumes it, not something which is 20 days old and tastes like nothing. So when we started to talk with Strella, and when I heard what these guys were doing, and I'm like, oh wow, why didn't I think of that? Because the entire research community that has been doing research on shelf life extension and post harvest technology has always looked at what to constrict, what chemicals to block, how to pack, how to improve supply chain parameters like temperature and so on and so forth. Nobody looked at, like, can we just listen? Can we just see what these produce are communicating by means of either carbon dioxide gas or even ethylene, which is a ripening agent? So when Strella started doing it, and I was like, oh, we always thought about suppressing ethylene, controlling ethylene, and these guys are actually trying to find out how much ethylene has been generated and link that to the maturity and the freshness of the product, and then telling people, hey, we know when your product is best, at its best quality, so go consume it. I think that intrigued me. And then I was like, can we work together, please? This is fun.
So did it first cross your desk when you were, did you first learn about Strella when you were working in operations and innovation with another brand?
Yeah, so I was at Breatheway at Curation Food. So this was, late last year when I heard about Strella through a mutual friend. And I was like, oh, I never heard of this. And, you know, and then I, was introduced to both Catherine and Jay. And then we had this long conversation. And I was like, guys, this is exciting. I'm like, I could feel the goosebumps. I'm like, I want to be a part of this, because I've been enough around packaging, enough around everything else, but this was quite unique. So I'm glad they had me on. That was quite a long time, but yeah, we worked our things out, and it was good.
I am very impressed because Shabazz, you know this, and Catherine and Jay, I'm not sure if you know this, but my background is at wholesale distribution. I worked for a decade at a warehouse where our entire strategy was FIFO. It was like sell it or smell it, first in, first out. Like that is what we lived and died by at wholesale distribution in our warehouse. And we had the banana ripening rooms. We did all of that right there. So I'm very familiar with a lot of what Shabazz was explaining as it relates to the ethylene and knowing when it's going to taste the best and when it has what did you say the right term is, Shabazz? We're not saying shelf life anymore. What are we saying?
We're saying fresh life.
The fresh life of food. And really now, as the Produce Moms is so focused on, driving consumption and getting that, the end consumer, all of those downstream efforts, that's where I'm focused now, obviously. We want to get more fruits and vegetables on every table, but more importantly, we want people actually eating those fruits and vegetables. We too, at the Produce Moms, Catherine, that is a bone-chilling statistic about the volume of food waste in America and the world, especially when you compare it to the statistics for food insecurity and hunger. And so it is time for us to have real solutions. And I too believe that this is unlike anything I've ever heard of. The Produce Moms podcast will be right back. The Produce Challenge is a tool that we've been publishing at the Produce Moms since 2013. This tool is an incredible, easy way for you to discover more varieties of fruits and vegetables in the produce department. It is a proven tool and strategy to get us all to eat more fruits and vegetables in both volume and variety. When we started the tool in 2013, the goal was to encourage everyone to go into the produce department and try them all. Find your favorite, explore all the fruits and vegetables, and we are still proud to be doing this today. So make sure that you check out the producemoms.com/challenge to view this month's produce challenge. Remember, it's never too late to start. This tool helps you eat more fruits and vegetables, a different fruit or vegetable every day. It's also a great tool for seasonality, and you can count on us at the Produce Moms for all of the tips that you need on how to select, store, and serve each of the produce items of the day in the Produce Challenge through our social media channels. Hope to see you taking the Produce Challenge soon. We're here with the leadership team at Strella. So let's talk about how it all began, shall we? Jay and Catherine, I mean, as the founders, this has got to be your story to tell.
So yeah, I was a junior in college actually, so started kind of on the early side. Had read that statistic about 40% of food going to waste. And frankly speaking, was procrastinating because my alternative option was graduate school. And so I started skipping class and going to fields and farms and orchards instead of attending my courses.
And where were you studying, Catherine? I mean, to have access to all of that, where were you studying?
I was studying at University of Pennsylvania. So I was based out in Philly, and I was reading all these papers about the food supply chain. Coming from a biological background, what stood out to me was that we don't really treat food like it's a living organism, like what Shabazz was saying, is that we treat food like it's a commodity in the sense that it's static and lifeless. But the reality is we're dealing with produce, and produce has a shelf life, and it operates the same way that other biological organisms do. And that really stood out to me, considering that's all I knew at the time. And so started learning about food supply chain. I went and visited a bunch of farmers. One of the most incredible ones was Rice Fruit Company out in Pennsylvania, in Gardner's. And Leighton sat me down and explained to me the entire process of growing an apple and bringing it all the way to the store. And it was incredibly fascinating. And he was super patient with all my silly questions. And then through speaking with a bunch of different growers and packers and distributors, began to formulate a concept around Strella. And then around about a year and a half into it, after a lot of the core pieces of the technology had started to be fleshed out, I met Jacob at a co-founder networking event.
Catherine, what year was this? Tell us more so that we can connect the timeline here.
It was 2018.
So there you have it. Strella is a baby, but a baby with so much impact. This is just the beginning, and you already have so much momentum and are already making a really big difference. So Jay, let's make sure that we talk now about that moment when you and Catherine connected at this co-founder event. I want to hear from your point of view how you and Catherine decided to start this thing together.
If anyone's ever been to like a startup meetup kind of thing, I always say there's about 2,000 scammers and maybe one or two cool people. And so you got to kind of sift through the crowd. But Catherine was, giving her again, 2 to 3 wine pitch. I guess there's a trend here about apples. And I think I was probably the only other person in Philadelphia who knew who the apple growers were in Washington. And so I'd worked in cherries actually quite a bit with the same growers as apple and pear growers in the past at DuPont, and knew that these folks were very, very innovative, and they were really, really interested in new technology. And Catherine was getting to really core challenges that they're facing. And so I actually left DuPont, left kind of the big company, and was looking to do something small. I always say, I want to be able to pedal a bike and feel it move when I pedal. And those large companies, sometimes it's really hard to see your impact or to make an impact. We had some really great technology actually at DuPont, and our customers are very innovative. They really want new technology. And so you've got to be able to put it in front of them. And we were able to do that. So that's why I decided to join Strella, is we had the technology to make an impact, and the motivation and kind of the positioning.
Jay, you mentioned you spent a lot of time during your DuPont days with the apple, pear, and cherry growers. Let's talk a little bit about why apples are such a perfect pairing, so to say, with what you all have to offer at Strella.
I think everyone who's listening to this podcast probably knows if you want year-long supply of a product, you've got a few variables. One is, region, one is elevation, and one is storage. And so, especially in the United States and Canada, apples and pears, we get year-long supply by storing them for up to a year. And so if you put apples into a controlled atmosphere storage room and you take the oxygen out and it's dark and cold, 9 months from now, it's different than when you put it in there. And how different it is really hard to get a sense of because the scale is 5 million apples. And so you've got $1 to $5 million worth of apples in a CA room, and you're really not sure what's going on in there. And you can lose quite a bit of money, or you can save quite a bit of money if you make the right decision on distribution. So that's kind of where the first in, first out to first expiry, first out came. Apple packers had, that's not our unique innovation necessarily. Apple packers have been doing that for quite a while with their controlled atmosphere storage rooms. Turns out, if you don't have the right data, it's still hard to execute. So we're adding another data layer there that lets us be more precise with the right decision. And then taking that methodology down the supply chain. So if you're a retail grocer and you have 10 lots of apples in your inventory, very, very likely they're not going to expire in the order of the one you got first is going to expire first. The one you got second is going to expire second. I use a terrible analogy, but it's the best one I can come up with, of like an ER. If you show up to the ER with, bleeding out of your head and they're like, sorry, man, that guy was here first, the ER would be a little messier. And that's kind of what the produce supply chain is right now.
Right. I think that's a great analogy that people can immediately connect with. So keep using it, because I think that's a great way to describe what you all are doing.
I'm going to need some black eyeliner if I keep talking about death this much, but it is what it is. It's the right analogy, I guess.
This also kind of brings me back, and we've had a few apple growers. I mean, apples have been a huge supporter. The entire Washington apple region. We also work with some folks in Michigan that are great, wonderful growers of apples, big supporters of what we do at the Produce Moms. So we have no shortage of apple-centric content. And when you think about the volume of apples that are consumed here in America, it's a really important commodity for our country and for our households. So I definitely also want to bring up, I mean, when we talk about the innovation that takes place, even just with like breeding and everything, this is all what Strella is doing, is empowering the entire operation, because these growers are spending millions of dollars and decades of time in investing in new apple varieties, simply to do what? To find that variety that is going to taste good. But more importantly, I think that the taste good is kind of the warm and fuzzy sunshine and rainbows song. More importantly, it's about what apple is grower friendly here. What apple is going to be able to sit in that storage unit and come out 9 months later and taste like it's fresh off the tree. And the only way, like, you are that missing link in the, when you think about all the technology that's available right now, Strella, when I gained clarity on what Strella stood for, I was like, this is the missing link in the chain. That is how I feel. And I spent a lot of time in Washington myself, supporting these growers with their communication strategies, and also just my continuing education to be able to be a good spokesperson for this industry. So I wanted to share that, as we're using apples as an example. I mean, this is really, Jay, I mean, anything you want to add on, but I view this as something that drives the whole apple industry and all of their innovation.
80% of the operations of an apple packer or even a grower is really organized around getting this stuff to store long enough to go to the shelf. If you think about Red Delicious, only a couple people like Red Delicious, but they last longer, and the industry could store them all year long before the technology caught up. And that's why Red Delicious exists at all. And so, to your point, that's exactly it. We always say too, apples may not be someone's first thought on how can I save as a grocery store, but the reality is probably every household interacts with apples at some point, especially throughout the entire year. And so if you want to touch every single customer and make a good impression, apples is a really great category to do it. It's about 5% of the overall volume of produce.
Catherine, I know with every good founder story comes fundraising, and from what I understand, that's you're the fundraiser for this operation. And being where you're at in terms of a relatively young brand, you do have some notable investments. I mean, there's some great press around the investments that you've been able to garner up. Of course, you have a great product, but you also must be pretty good at pitching Strella. You've got Yamaha, Google, Mark Cuban. I know there are others, but my goodness, I want to hear more about your fundraising because it's impressive. Is like an understatement, but oh my gosh, it is just so inspiring to me.
It's definitely been a journey, like you said. We've raised about $11.5 million to date, and we're kind of that traditional Silicon Valley type startup. If you think about if you've seen those shows and stuff. So it definitely comes with some exciting, silly founder stories, but it also comes with a whole boatload of stress. I think, I didn't know anything about fundraising when I first started this company. I took maybe one class on entrepreneurship in general, and then the rest was YouTube and trying and failing again, and then eventually figuring out how to get it done. And I certainly don't want to underestimate Jay's contribution here, because I would say that the first 75% of the way I'm trudging along, and then I get really tired and burnt out right around the negotiation part. And I have all these like guys calling me at like 2 or 3 in the morning trying to negotiate a deal, and I'm stressed out and I'm like ready to cave in. And Jay will be right there saying, "Nope, we're not taking this deal. Nope, you're gonna stand your ground. You're gonna negotiate." And so Jay is kind of the guy who comes in at the last second when I'm so tired and so done with it, to make sure that the deal closes the way that we want it to. So it's so important. And it's really valuable to have backup like that.
I feel like when people think about like a Silicon Valley startup, there are some certain connotations, and it's kind of an interesting place to be. I certainly think there are the bunch of young kids raise a bunch of money and don't know anything about this industry. That stuff happens, and I think that there's often a misalignment with like the fundraising kind of business with the real world, and we're really trying to fight against that. Shabazz and I are from the industry. Catherine's from science. Yamaha, as an investor, a primary investor, is dedicated to specialty technology and agriculture. The partner we work with at Google owns an orchard in Washington. So we're trying to bring, the freedom of innovation that comes with startup capital, but also the industry knowledge to really make an actual difference inside the system that currently exists. And so, for what it's worth, that's our perspective, as opposed to we raised $100 million and we have technology, but I've never been to an orchard. That's really not us.
I think everyone knows that's not you. But yeah, thank you for sharing that. So what have you been able to do with now that you've raised, a pretty significant amount of funds? But obviously, as anyone who's studied technology, ag tech, fintech, startups, the need for more capital will remain undoubtedly. But tell us how those investments from these notable, iconic investors backing you, how has that changed the trajectory, Catherine? How have you been able to evolve and grow?
Yeah, it's been absolutely instrumental. So apple and pear packing has been where we grew up, and where we've learned and cut our teeth. And so to date, we work with the majority of all the major marketing groups in Washington state in apples. We've monitored over 2 billion pieces of fruit, which is a stat that I'm super excited about, especially as we think about food waste, and more importantly, have helped packers save a bunch of money. And in the last couple of years, we've obviously noticed a lot of really crazy seasons. It's certainly never an easy industry to be a part of. And so any small thing that we can do to help the packer is really important to us. We're moving into retail now. So in essence, retailers are at the end of this gigantic game of hot potato, and they're not experts in apples or pears or bananas. They're managing hundreds of thousands of different items, and they don't have very much information on these perishable products. And so what we do is we use the data that we collect with our sensor technology in order to help a retailer make a better decision about what gets to the store shelf first. And we're also expanding into bananas now as well. So ripening, as everyone knows, is more of an art than a science. And we're here to bring the science element to it. So we're basically training AI or machine learning models to automatically ripen bananas by dynamically controlling the ripening room based on what the banana is telling us about how mature it is.
I mean, working at Indie Fruit, I remember like we had an entire section of our warehouse. The doors were painted yellow. We called it Banana Land. It was, where we would just put pallets and pallets as high as it feels like as high as you could see, right? It's like three levels of pallets. And there was a small team of employees that worked in Banana Land, and they would literally have to open these massive doors. They're like big, giant garage doors, is what it looks like. And then it's like we could all smell it. I mean, you could all smell the ethylene as it like whooshes out of these, ripening rooms. And then you've got your employee going in there doing, how many bananas would be in that multi-tier pallet? Well, they're going and grabbing a few, typically all from the lower portion, doing a spot check or a QA check to make sure that they're still on track with how the ethylene is coming out. They make adjustments on if they need to crank up the ethylene or turn it down, and then they walk out. And then think of all of the wasted energy, just even with opening the door, right? I mean, I never saw it as a wasteful. I just saw it as the way. I didn't view it as an inefficient or unsustainable or wasteful strategy. I just knew it as the way. Not until I heard about Strella and heard about that being part of your trajectory of things to improve.
Absolutely. And it's also really subjective, right? A lot of banana ripening is based around someone coming in and checking the color of the banana. And I think we've spoken to dozens of ripeners at this point, and every single one of them has a different feeling for what a stage 2.5 versus what a stage 3 looks like. And as a result of this subjective measurement, it's really hard to create consistency in your supply chain because you're basically relying on one ripener to make the same decision as a different ripener in another distribution center, for example. And so what we're trying to do is create a quantifiable, non-subjective data set around what the color of a banana is, and then use that information to ripen bananas in a more consistent way.
How is that going to help us in an industry? I mean, so I love it just because I view it as an operational efficiency, but help us understand what the real win is. Like, how are you getting people like Yamaha, Google, and Mark Cuban to invest in this? Like, why is this such a revolutionary thing? And how's it going to improve the world?
I think that produce is the most important category at the grocery store. 92% of consumers pick their grocery store based on the quality of produce that it provides. And people buy with their eyes, firstly, and then they buy for flavor. And if we can improve both the visual aspects, so improve the consistency of color in bananas, for example, and also improve the quality of the product that the consumer is eating, then we can grow not only the produce industry, which is what we're passionate about, but also grow the way that consumers feel about eating produce, right? We're no longer looking at it as a commodity, but rather something to get excited about, something that's part of their healthy lifestyle. And that's what really gets us excited, is that this industry has so much potential, right? We're the ultimate healthy food. And if we did a better job communicating this to our customers and showing them how exciting produce can be, then we can grow this whole industry exponentially, I believe. And I think everybody at Strella believes.
I definitely believe it. No, it's great. So Jay, when you've spent so much time, on the farm with the growers and shippers of this industry, how do you view these innovations as improving like the worker welfare or the human capital element on the farm?
That's an interesting question. I think a really clear, obvious one is think about controlled atmosphere storage rooms, which is a little past the farm, but not a lot. There's no oxygen in those rooms. It's 1% oxygen or less. And if you don't know what's in there, sometimes you've got to go in and see. And that is incredibly dangerous. And people have died from that. Now, regulations and processes have got a lot better, but no one should ever be going in a dangerous environment if they can help it, in our view. There's also a lot of like repackaging, right? So you've got to like take a whole box apart if it's more mature than you think and sort it again. So there's a lot of labor costs and inefficiencies there. So there's quite a bit of, and then just profitability. You know, I think Catherine mentioned this, and we're really aligned with you. We're very passionate about inspiring people to eat more produce, and if it tastes better or lasts longer in that fresh zone, like Shabazz said, people will eat more. And like we always say, is there anything that would help the industry as a whole more than 5% or 10% more consumption? That will solve so many problems. So that's kind of where we're focused. Is you need short-term profitability, but it's really about growing the category.
Shabazz, let's talk. I mean, your role, VP Post-Harvest Technology. All right. So when I think about that role, I think once it's off the tree, you know, then you're the one who's kind of taking care of this technology. What makes Strella tick? Like, what is it that you're doing? How does this thing go? I mean, I know you can't share everything, obviously, but help people understand exactly what your role entails and how Strella really, what it does once the fruit walk us through the journey. You know, once that apple comes off the tree, how does Strella become part of that fresh life cycle?
It's a two-part answer. The first part answer, I would say, we, as Catherine mentioned, we grew up with apples and pears. And then I come in and then we start going to avocados and bananas and mangoes and papayas. And, we expand it to everything that we can think of. So, that's one part of my role. The second part of the post of harvest technologist or technology is, once the product comes out of harvest, what we do at Strella is, we have our sensors. We make sure that we are listening. As you said, we can't tell you everything, but we'll still mention we are listening and we are hearing what is happening to that particular fruit in that period of time, and then correlating that with the freshness of the product, the way the consumer and the retailer is going to accept it. And that's the relationship and the correlation I make along with our other smarty pants that we have in the company. One of the things that we did with that much amount of funding that we got was hire a whole bunch of more smarty pants, including me. And we've got a job to do, and we do our smarty pants job. That's what we do.
I love that. Now let's talk about. I kind of want to come back to that. What you mentioned earlier, you've seen all these solutions through your role at Curation Foods and all of the different work that you've done for this industry as it relates to innovation. Innovation in fresh produce, really, folks, it comes down, yes, some of that is the variety of the product, but usually it comes down to either how products are packaged or, different ways, like, that value added section, like the snacking category boom. That's kind of what our industry views as innovation. There's, and of course we're always, I don't want to dismiss the fact that we are constantly striving to bring the most flavorful and delicious fruits and vegetables, and also the most grower friendly fruit and vegetable varieties mainstream. So that is a huge part of innovation as well. Okay. But from a consumer point of view, the way you interface with innovation at the grocery store is typically through like these new, like whether it's like the salad kits which is how I first met with Shabazz, or the snacking category, you see that expanding, or all of these new packaging solutions, most of which are rooted in, sustainability goals and or shelf life goals. So let's talk about what you said really at the top of this show, Shabazz. You were saying, You mentioned coatings and packaging, and Strella's like the outlier. It's something else. And I want to emphasize to people, like, packaging and coatings, like, that's not really what the consumer wants. We know that the consumer is driving retailers, and especially driving every brand in the produce department in particular. We've got the raw, healthy, closest to earth food, and then so much of it's packaged in plastic. And that's a whole nother discussion on how so many of these other packaging alternatives can't necessarily, we don't have a really good swap for it yet, or else it would have already existed. So what I'm getting at is packaging isn't really it's not the love language of consumers, and certainly consumers don't want to think about coatings being on their food. And so let's talk a little bit about that. I mean, that's really been, and I didn't know it till you and I talked about Strella, but that's really been what we've hung our hat on as it relates to mitigating food waste in the supply chain, until of course Strella came along.
Well, if you ask for my opinion, I've been in this industry, and in the last 11 years, I was involved in packaging. So if I am given an option to eat a fruit that was packed in a packaging versus something in a coating, I prefer packaging, because I don't know what's in the coating. I've only known, I just don't know what's in the coating. Not all the packaging is bad because of the supply chain. Because of the packaging, we are able to provide a food safe and a healthier option to the consumer. Right? The supply chains have become longer. And you were right. All the innovation has been for the consumer. All the innovation that they see is either a different variety of product, or it comes in a different packaging. That's all they get to see. With Strella, we're using none. We're neither discounting the fact of the packaging or the coatings or the chemical treatments or whatever. We are providing a better experience to the consumer by not including anything which could be considered unsustainable, right? If we just completed a trial, and we figured, without just using Strella and our quality management platform, we were able to extend the fresh life of a product by 40%. Now that is huge. We didn't use no coatings, we didn't use no packaging as such, but just by listening, just by rearranging inventory from a FIFO to a FIFO, if we can provide a better tasting experience and a product that can last up to 40% more, that's what we are providing by Strella. And I think consumers are going to appreciate the freshness. You can have something last 5 days, and if you eat it and you cannot even taste an apple, if you close your eyes, and I always, because my background is food science, I always tell people to do this experiment where they can relate between taste, flavor, and aroma. So I tell them, go get some cinnamon sugar and just eat cinnamon sugar. Taste, have a first taste, and then close your nose and then taste it again. You will not taste anything. And you don't want your produce to be, crunchy, but then you're like, if you close your eyes, you can't tell it. Did I bite into an apple or a pear or a radish for that? Or a potato, a potato can be crunchy. So I think that's the task that we have on our hand, and we've been quite successful. And now the goal is to translate that knowledge, that success that we've had in apples and pears, and then bring it to other commodities as well, like a banana and an avocado and a mango and a papaya or whatever.
What we think about innovation, it's typically been packaging and those types of things. But if you think about consumers, to me, there's two really key trends. People want less food waste, obviously, and people are price conscious, especially at this point in time. I think there may be a little bit of a misconception that I've talked with folks. I don't know that the price of produce is really the issue. It's the price of produce when you have to throw it away, right? That $2 avocado that I threw away, now it was expensive. If you ate it and it was delicious, our generation buys $400 shoes. A $2 avocado, if it's delicious and was cool, that's great. And then the other thing is, I really don't think your average consumer is saying grocer A threw away 4% of their apples. That's terrible. It's when they throw an apple away, they feel terrible. And then you kind of just want to avoid that whole experience. So having something that doesn't taste great at home or that you have to throw away, that's a really mentally damaging thing to people. And that's where our innovation is trying to focus. Paying for something that you throw away is worst case scenario. Even if it was 50 cents, it's terrible. So our innovation is changing that consumer experience at home, but you've got to do that all the way up the supply chain.
Stay with us, everyone. We've got the team at Strella. We'll be right back. I love grocery shopping. You all know that. And there's nothing that brings a smile to my face like when I actually see a Produce Moms branded fruit or vegetable on the grocery store shelf. So today I want to remind you all that we actually have an Idaho potato line that's available at select Walmart stores nationwide. So look for the Produce Moms branded Easy Baker potatoes. They are individually wrapped, triple washed, ready to cook Idaho potatoes grown by our amazing brand partners at Wada Farms. Make sure that you look for them. You are going to love them. We have so many ideas, recipes, inspirations, even a field trip to the farm that's available on our website. All you have to do is scan the little QR code that's on your Produce Moms Easy Baker to experience it all. Thank you so much, and eat more potatoes. We have Shabazz, Catherine, and Jay, part of the leadership team at Strella. Jay and Catherine are the co-founders, and Shabazz is the vice president of post-harvest technology. And how Strella is a solution for our retailers.
Yeah, retail is very critical to the whole supply chain. Obviously, retail is how us as consumers interact with produce. And we could do a great job growing, throughout the whole year. But if we don't get the retail side right as well, then it doesn't go anywhere. So retailers are getting product at the end of the shelf life already. And so they're under the most stress. Retailers also get credit for things that go right and things that go wrong. So it's a really important place to focus. 92% of consumers pick the grocery store based upon the quality of produce, which Catherine mentioned earlier. And so it's really critical to the whole business. Our goal is to grow the category of produce, and you do that through quality. So we have an automated quality management platform that can go from the grower side all the way up to the store shelf. And that guarantees that the quality is better on the shelf with data. So if you think about, a grower, and he can tell you every single thing about every tree that he grew, we're bringing that level of depth and information and technology all the way down the supply chain, but in an automated way. So you've kind of got the grower whispering in your ear 10 months after your apple's grown, hey, sell this one first, so that the quality is maintained. And so that's what we're bringing to retail, is automating that depth of knowledge that exists in the field, and making better decisions. And so that's what we're really focused on. And last part, that's important to everyone. It's important to consumers because we want healthier food. It's important to growers too, because if that apple isn't of the highest quality, now that grower's harmed, even after he's handed off a good product. So the retail part is absolutely critical in closing the loop.
I totally agree with Jay. The grower spends an inordinate amount of time, money, resources, and ultimately blood, sweat, and tears to get that perfect piece of produce to the retailer. But sometimes the retailer just doesn't have the information necessary to make the right decision. If you look at the way that retailers currently manage quality, they're pulling like a small clamshell or a couple of pieces of fruit off of every truck, trying to make a decision about what the quality looks like. You've got people making subjective decisions in the store about what to throw away versus what to keep on the store shelf. And oftentimes those decisions are related more to what's in the back of the store. How much do we need to rotate more than the quality itself? And so what we're doing is we're connecting the supply chain with data. So using our sensor technology that predicts the shelf life of produce to bring that level of resolution to the retailer.
Yeah, and just to be clear, our view, and we believe this as strongly as possible, everyone in the supply chain is doing absolutely the best they possibly can with the volume they're managing and the resources they have. I think, we can maybe kick to Shabazz, someone who's got a PhD in post-harvest technology, been in the industry 20 years, to expect someone in a store, across thousands of stores across the US to have that level of knowledge and manage that correctly is really unfair and not going to happen. And so that's why we needed to automate and bring data to those places so that we can actually enable the right decision.
I look at our automated quality management system sort of an outsourcing of the quality management system of the entire supply chain, where we know what's happening and it's very seamless to the retailer. Um, as Catherine mentioned, only a few pieces, clamshells, are quality checked on arrival, and we cannot expect that level of detail. And that is something that we will be doing and providing. So, the entire supply chain is taken care of.
Well, I feel like we've discussed it all. I mean, at least we've got the bird's eye view here of what Strella is all about. We've covered the founder story. What a great founder story! I can only imagine what it was like when you guys were at that meetup and through the sea of people that you wouldn't want to work with. You found each other, and that worked out well. To working on the farm being such a solution for these Washington apple growers, to the point where now we're able to expand Strella to all these other commodities. The hiring that you've been able to do with the fundraising and the invaluable impact that you are having on retailers with this great new technology solution at grocery retail, which I imagine has to be a huge solution to them as well as it relates to labor. I mean, they're able to lean on your technology to really help manage the labor as it relates to the merchandising in the fresh produce department, because unlike the aisle 9 in the grocery store where it's a bunch of packaged goods with months of shelf life, merchandising and produce, it requires you're culling those cases every day. So this is a huge labor saving for an industry that is very labor strapped, when you consider the retailer's point of view too. So I'm so thrilled we were able to have this conversation. I learned a lot. I've become more adamant and confident in my statement that Strella is that missing link. Strella is closing that loop. I know that this is just the beginning of what is a destiny that a ride you're already towards of just great success. I know best days are ahead, and you are going to change the produce industry, and you're going to change the world, which is amazing. So with that, you all get final remarks before we close out this show. I'm thankful you came. You all can visit StrellaBiotech.com to check out more of their website, connect with all three of these folks on LinkedIn. So Shabazz, we'll start with you for any closing remarks.
Well, as you mentioned, Lori, we're here to stay. We're changing the world. We are conscious about sustainability. We want to make sure we are the missing link that provides and connects the farm to the fork, or farm to the crunch of a hand of a consumer who's biting into this juicy, most tastier apple that they can bite on. And, you know, yeah, I think that's the goal. Uh, give a fresh life experience to all of our consumers.
We're passionate people with big goals, and we do want to change the world and improve produce and health and profitability from the growers to the retailers. That being said, with a large, lofty, change of the world kind of mission, we also really understand that tomorrow has to happen. And there's a bridge between here and the future. So if there's anyone out there who thinks it'd be a great partnership with us, we'd love to have that conversation. We definitely pride ourselves in making scalable solutions that aren't painful. I think a lot of solutions in the produce industry are very ops heavy, a lot of implementation, a lot of changing process. We don't do any of that. We're pretty seamless. And so, if you're afraid of, oh, this is probably going to be a lot of work to get going, that's not the case. We really focus a lot on making things easy. So that's my closing remarks: is innovation doesn't have to be hard or costly.
When we talk about, the food waste, carbon emissions being greater than that of all U.S. transportation combined, we sometimes like to point fingers or assign blame to certain elements. And I think the reality is that every single individual player within the supply chain is doing their utmost best job that they can to reduce shrink, because it's not profitable and it's certainly not something that benefits the industry as a whole. And so our solution and our thinking is around what happens when we unite everybody in the supply chain. What happens if we take some of these siloed segments that may or may not have spoken to each other in the past and work together towards a common goal, which is getting the consumer that perfect piece of produce every single time they go to the grocery store. And so that's kind of where we see ourselves fitting in, as being the guardian angels, if you will, of produce as it moves from hand to hand, so that when we do ultimately reach our end goal, our end consumer, they get the best experience we can provide them.
The guardian angels focused on the fresh life. I just love it. I feel like we need to make t-shirts. But I have so enjoyed this episode. I believe in your business, your brand, your impact. I believe in the three of you. I'm honored that you could join us today. Everyone, I want to thank you for tuning in. This has been a very informative episode. We didn't even get to any of like our banter, other than, kind of calling them all smarty pants. But I think it's obvious that they all are. These are brilliant people behind a brilliant solution. Don't forget to subscribe to the Produce Moms podcast on Apple, Spotify, Amazon, and any preferred podcast platform. Check out the Produce Moms on Facebook, LinkedIn, Instagram, TikTok, Twitter, and YouTube. Special thanks to everyone involved with the Produce Moms podcast, my amazing team. Stay tuned till next time. Hey everybody, you asked, we listened. So I know that you all love our dog food recipes on theproducemoms.com. Together with our brand partners at Sage Fruit, we have actually published a dog food cookbook. So visit theproducemoms.com/ebook and you can download your free copy of the dog food cookbook presented by the Produce Moms and Sage Fruit.